I fought my lungs and skin back from the demon hordes. You're welcome, doctors. Hey everybody, your buddy Basil here, and you are listening to the Joyspiracy Theory. This week, we have an interview with Mr. Mark, or Mark for short. And you guys are going to love it. But before I tell you more about that, I want to thank everybody who supports the Patreon page. There's a new Ask Baz that went up there just recently, in the past week or so. And so, if you listen to this podcast and you enjoy it or are edified by it or just value its existence and want to see it continue, you can head to patreon.com/thejoyspiracytheory and just sign up to support the show for whatever you think it's worth. And in return, there's all sorts of shout outs and bonus episodes and all sorts of stuff. So you can head over to patreon.com/thejoyspiracytheory. Me and the cats would appreciate that because almost all that money goes to buying wet food. So enjoy. So my cats thank you, all you Patreon supporters. Also, just a reminder, if you haven't done so yet, if supporting the show financially is not in the cards for you, there's a couple of super great ways that you can help out the show. One of them is leaving a rating and a review on iTunes. It helps more than you guys could understand. It's, our lives are ruled by algorithms, and algorithms are ruled by reviews and ratings. So head over to iTunes and leave a rating or a review, or just leave a rating and a review in whatever podcatcher you use. If you don't use a podcatcher or don't want to leave a rating and a review, just hit the little share button on this episode and just text it to a friend or post it on Facebook or something like that. If you do post it on Facebook, tag me, bro, so I can see it and give it a thumbs up. Okay, we're going to get into the interview here. This is Mr. Mark for short. And guys, this is incredible. Just a little bit of a warning. There are some adult themes. So, just as usual, I find myself saying adult themes, discretionary warnings a lot on this show, which is not something I expected to do, but that's just the house we've built together. But we talk about, oh my gosh, the life of a person in a coma, an incredible story about journeying through the spiritual world while he was in a coma, and then donating a kidney. It's incredible. Let's get going.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Is this Mark?
It is.
What?
Hi, Basil.
What's up, buddy? How you doing?
Oh, it's another beautiful day here in the Northwest.
Oh, good. You sound great. But before we go any further, let me know what you're grateful for today.
I knew you were going to ask me that.
Yep.
Several things to be grateful for. I'm mainly grateful for this community. It was a wonder that I happened upon it about 5 years ago. So very grateful for that, and my health and family.
There you go. Very good. I like that. The big ones, the big things. Well, that's great. You said you're in the Midwest. Where in the Midwest are you?
Northwest.
North.
Sorry.
Oh, maybe I said Midwest. You probably said Northwest. So
Yes.
What are we looking at? Washington, Oregon?
Right on the border, Oregon, Washington, technically Portland, but I live in Washington.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, well, there we go. We actually got somebody on the coast this time. That doesn't happen very often.
Right, yeah.
Okay, well, very good, buddy. How's the weather been up there? It's been kind of cold on the West Coast here.
Cold and wet, yes.
Cold and wet, but I guess that's normal for you guys, isn't it?
Pretty much, yep. If you can't handle cold and wet, then don't come up here.
All right, you heard it here, folks. Stay out if you're looking for sunshine in the Northwest. Well, that's great, man. Have you always been up in that area, or is that a recent development?
No, pretty much my entire life. I've moved out to the Portland area recently, I should say, within the last 10 years, but grew up out in Central Oregon, more area is kind of a desert out there than it is out here in the Northwest. It's the two temperate zones. You know, you got the Cascades that take all the rain, and you got the desert on the other side. So that's where I grew up, is out in the Central Oregon area, and moved out here to the big city to get an education.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say actually, while you were mentioning that, I'm realizing that I don't know anything about Oregon besides Portland, and I know nothing about Washington besides Seattle. So we're we're all learning something a little bit today.
There you go.
Right on, man. Well, okay, so you grew up there. That's where you were born and bred. You were made for the cold and the wet. But what was it like? I mean, let's start from the beginning. Tell me about your childhood. Where do we start here?
Well, way back when I was a lad,
Uh-huh.
growing up in Central Oregon, the uh, the 70s were, you know, right about the time when technology really wasn't around yet. So um, the only thing really to do growing up was to get in trouble. Uh, and I and I say 70s, more like, you know, 70s, 80s is that genre, that those years when I was growing up.
Yeah, the golden years.
Right. Yeah. So, you know, getting into trouble was unfortunately part of my pastime, and trying to find things to do when you grew up in a small town. There's not much to do. So looking for things to do sometimes fell on being creative.
Oh, you mean being creative in artistic sense or finding new ways to make trouble?
Pretty much new ways to make trouble. Although, you know, artistic in some senses as I grew up and um, realized what life was kind of about. I did kind of fall towards artistic things, and um, learned how to draw and paint, and so I do that as well. But
Oh, cool.
mainly growing up, there was a lot of good, there was a lot of bad. So, you know, luckily I grew up with a mom and dad that were Christians.
Oh.
I grew up in a church, so um, my story doesn't involve the typical, you know, coming to Jesus later on in life, or, you know, at least my story doesn't. I don't think it has that same type of uh, nostalgia or neat conversion that,
Yeah, you
you
have
know.
a very short BC period.
Right, yeah. So grew up with Jesus my whole life, and knew about the Lord, and my mom prayed for me a lot through my years of rebellion, and um, so
Now, what kind of Christian are we talking about here? Normal, or were they? Was there a certain denomination, just so we can get an idea of, because there's such a wide spectrum of experiences like that.
right. Well, we went to a four square church, so just your basic Bible believing Christian. Um, there was there was a time when I felt that I was in touch and felt God's presence in my life when I was really young, kind of before I went through that stage of finding things to do and getting in trouble and venturing off. But um, I've never left the Lord, but just having that personal experience I didn't get till later on in life.
Yeah, that's kind of how it is. Also, growing up in the church, it seems like back when in simpler times there was, less maybe even theological sort of variants available to you, and the adults would tell you how it is, and that's how you experienced God and experienced the world. It was a lot simpler back then, wasn't it?
Yeah, it really was, and I miss that sometimes. That simple life and quiet and just a slower time in life. You know, you grow up, then you get responsibilities and got to do things and have a
Yeah.
family, and yeah.
Now
So
you mentioned you were, causing some trouble, getting in trouble. What kind of stuff were you getting in trouble for?
so you know, mainly trying to entertain ourselves with either taking baseball bats to mailboxes or uh, in our cars we would,
So federal crimes.
maybe racing down dirt roads and rally racing and just doing things that are dangerous. And I probably shouldn't have lived through most of it, but we crashed a couple times, and we get in trouble and do drinking with beer, and we actually
I like putting it that way. Drinking with beer. We do drinking with beer.
We actually we broke into our neighbor's shed one time that had homemade wine in it, and I never had wine before. And I don't know, I was probably about I would say 10, 11 years old, so it was really young. It's my first real experience.
Oh wow.
But yeah.
Homemade shed wine.
Yeah.
That's very Oregon sounding to me for some reason.
It was the worst tasting stuff I've ever had in my life. Pretty much turned me off of wine for the rest of my life.
That's funny. So you're really doing kind of the small town type of stuff.
Yeah, go out with friends, bonfires. Everywhere you went, you have a car because everything was 20 miles away.
Sure. Well, at least you were wearing your seatbelt. Back in the 70s when seatbelts barely existed.
Yeah, no.
Okay, all right. So you were causing trouble, but seems just like the normal amount of trouble for a small town kid in Oregon. And did your parents continue to go to church? I mean, was that a constant thing, or was that something that drifted later on?
No, we actually, my whole life, as far as growing up as a kid in the home, my parents always went to church every Sunday. Matter of fact, I'm the last out of 6 kids. And my mom used to get all of us dressed up. We'd take baths the night before. We didn't have a shower. Mm-hmm. So we'd share bath water the night before.
Nice. Classic.
Yeah. And Sunday morning, we'd be dressed in our best, Sunday best, and we'd drive about 45 miles one way to go to church, and then we'd drive back home.
Yeah, there's something about that sort of the great expanse of small town living that people who grow up in cities will never understand.
Yes, absolutely.
That's so funny. So how did when you were getting in trouble, how did your parents kind of react to that? What were they like? Were they kind of like a boys will be boys type of thing, or did you fear the Reaper when Mom came around?
Luckily, I was the last out of 6 kids, and by the time I came around, they were pretty much do whatever you want, just don't get in trouble. So I was pretty good at hiding things. Mm-hmm. Didn't really draw attention to myself, so I was able to, get away with most of it. The occasional crash the car was hard to explain.
Oh yeah, that's a tough one to sweep under the rug.
Right. But other than that, I think they trusted me for the most part, so they left me alone. And I know Mom was doing a lot of praying for me. So, and looking back, I really can see where her prayers did wonders for me as far as not just getting me out of trouble, but also keeping me out of trouble. There was a pretty large drug scene in the Central Oregon town where I grew up, and it was pretty readily available.
Yeah, I was going to ask.
But there were several instances that I can recall, and I can see God's hand in steering me away from that. I never got into hard drugs, never got into marijuana till later in college. But that was just kind of a recreational thing. I never really stuck with it and really had no interest in it.
Hey, well, that's good. So it seems like you stayed away from a lot of the damaging, long-term damaging things there for a while.
Yeah, thank goodness. Yes, that's for sure.
Now, what was school like? Was it, I mean, in a small town, did you have to travel the 47 miles to go to school? How many students was there? What were you looking like?
So school was a little closer. We drove about 20 miles to school. So it wasn't too bad. And there was a bus route, but nobody wanted to take the bus. It was kind of a long bus ride.
Just a lonely bus driver making this route with no kids getting on.
Right. Yeah.
That's funny.
So, but school was, I was a class of 30 in my graduating class.
30 in
So
the
there,
entire class?
yes.
Wow, that
Yeah.
is small town.
Yeah. Pretty small. But, looking back at it and seeing where my kids are now, it's like, I kind of wish they had an opportunity like that too. So one of those things you don't appreciate till you look back.
Yeah, okay. So when let's see, I mean that sounds like you had a pretty um maybe constant is not the right word, but a pretty stable sort of childhood and young adulthood compared to some other people.
Pretty stable. Yeah, I would agree with that. I will say that rather than getting into drugs, I did kind of fall into other temptations like pornography was unfortunately available.
Oh yeah,
Um,
well you got to do something on a Saturday afternoon.
so that's something that is part of my story that um, kind of taken me down some roads that made life difficult later on.
Interesting. And this is back in the 70s. I mean, there's no internet. I mean, this is I feel like most people would literally stumble upon their first pornography like in the woods. There would be just a lone magazine just like hiding in a tree hole or something.
Well, it's funny you say that because that's pretty much how it was.
Called it.
Yeah, there was a old stone house that had burned down decades before, and somebody was up there with magazines and left them there. So going on a hike, minding my own business, you find this stuff. So,
Which is like it's such a common story and such like a classic tale to be told of young adulthood in rural America, just finding a magazine out in the wilderness somewhere. But it's
right,
also just the most baffling situation. Like, whoever put it there really had to put some distance between them and whoever they were trying to hide that from.
right, yeah. So that's kind of where it started, and there was um, early on there was some I would say mild sexual abuse within some realms that I was involved with really young that I think kind of swayed me towards that,
Yeah.
and made it kind of okay. I kind of knew it was bad, but I didn't really have the wherewithal of knowing that this is actually sin,
Yeah.
and I need to not do it and look at it. And anyways, it opened up a door that unfortunately was almost my nemesis later on in life.
Now, I do have to ask, and of course, this is a safe place. You don't got to talk about anything you don't want to talk about, but that was a pretty cryptic allusion to mild sexual abuse in some. I forgot even
Yeah,
what you said, but I mean, would you mind giving some more details just to give an idea of what that looked like?
yeah. So I can give details that I feel comfortable with. There's unfortunately someone else may listen to this that I don't know how they've dealt with it. I've been through counseling,
Yeah.
so I'm comfortable with where I'm at, and but
Yeah, and I
I've
mean,
never
we don't have to get graphic or anything, but
right no just kind of kids my own age and a couple kids that were older and experimenting with um, just each other and
right.
so things that later on in life after I went through counseling and realized this maybe where some of this is triggered that that was actually abuse back
Yeah.
then and I didn't recognize it until I had someone point it out to me. It's like, oh yeah, okay. So
Right, right, yeah.
so there's trauma there that I wasn't aware of and I've dealt with, and the Lord has brought me through that. But unfortunately, those people, I know those people still. I don't talk to them. I don't know where they're at, so I'm just going to leave it that kind of vague.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, and I mean, especially when it's all, when the age of children is close together, more or less, in a few years, and everybody's sort of discovering that, given the lack of
Sure.
sort of formal education, I guess. Not to say that the education has to be too specific, but
Right.
there is a lot of exploring at that time of life, and you don't necessarily know what anything is or what's wrong or what's right unless somebody in your life has taken the liberty of telling you.
Yeah. Yeah. There was definitely a sense of, hey, I think this is wrong, but hey, it feels good, and I'm going to keep doing it. And
Right.
until you get out of that and you realize that this is where these problems stem from. You gotta visit your history if you struggle with pornography or some kind of addiction like that, because pornography is basically an addiction, just like a drug.
Yeah.
Uh, so going back to your history, finding out those roots are important to try to weed those out.
Yeah. Yeah. So how did that I mean, you stumbled upon what may have been considered a treasure in the wilderness there at the time. And how did that sort of affect you or develop as years goes on?
So it eventually turned to uh, stealing pornography.
Oh.
Um, Too young to afford it, but knew I wanted it. Uh, so yeah, the criminal path is
I know,
underway.
man. I know, man. You're racking up quite a record here.
Um, and then, unfortunately, satellite TV was invented, and those big, the 10-foot round satellites that you had to
Oh
go out
my
and
gosh.
crank manually.
Yeah, that's so just okay, real quick. We got to talk about these giant satellite dishes. Because by the time I became, by the time I was sort of aware of the world, you would occasionally see these gigantic satellite dishes out back, and they had become a relic, almost like, it reminds me of just some sort of relic you would see on some sort of apocalyptic wasteland. Like, what could that possibly be for? And I think I knew they were for TV, but they were always so rusted and kind of beat up when they're in the people's backyards. Was that a normal thing to have these giant they're like radio telescopes almost?
Yes, they were, and if you had enough money, you could afford the ones that the snow and the mesh, it was mesh, so that all the weather would go through it. You didn't have to go out and clear it off.
Right.
And when they came out with the electric ones that would actually move to the satellite you wanted from inside the house, was even better. You didn't have to go outside and actually manual crank it. But you
Wow.
know,
Ancient technologies.
yeah, you actually had to find the satellite in the sky. You had someone in the house yelling at you, "Okay, you're there."
That is so funny. Sorry to
Uh,
interrupt. So, unfortunately, satellite TV came around, you said.
yeah, so pornography was more accessible, and um, I had a cousin who was the first one to get satellite TV, and he cracked his dad's parental code, like I think the first day. So uh, was getting pornography through that, and unfortunately, um, kind of opened up a new horizon of video. What's this?
Oh yeah, I bet that was quite the advancement in technology compared to your boondocks tomes you found out in the wilderness.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And with pornography, kind of like drug addiction, you're always looking for a different high, something more.
Yeah,
You're
it
never satisfied.
escalates.
Yeah, you're never satisfied with the level you're at. You're always looking for something more.
Mm-hmm. So was this a corporate activity, or were I feel like if you were trying to tune in yourself, you'd have to be difficult. Run in, check the screen, run back out, crank the satellite, run back in. Seems like it's a lot of work.
Well, that fortunately was with the newer
Ah, okay.
fandangled one with the electronic controls
Ah, I
by
see.
that point. And then we used to record them too. So yeah,
On an old VCR or something.
old VCR. Yep.
Again with the cybercrime, pirating pornography off of satellite television.
Yeah,
See,
yeah.
you
We were
thought you
quite,
were
quite
so
the criminal.
innocent as a kid, and now I'm racking up your rap sheet here.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, that's why I started with we the things we did were we found ways to be mischievous.
Yeah.
Whether or not it was obvious or not.
Now you keep saying we. You talking about you and your buddy who cracked the code?
Yeah, just friends and neighbors
Yeah.
specifically. So yeah, a lot of times it wasn't a private event where we were looking at especially the satellite
Yeah.
viewing.
Now I gotta imagine. I mean, how old are you? Do you think at this time?
Oh, I was probably 14, 13 or 14.
14, 13. Okay, so you're going through puberty, noticing girls, obviously. Now, what do you think it was that had you so focused on pornography, or were you also focused on trying to, get the attention of real women?
I did actually attempt to be Rico Suave.
didn't
Unfortunately,
didn't we all?
yeah, I was always the one in that friend category. I don't
Mm.
know if you're,
Oh,
you're
friend zone.
yeah, you're such a good friend, and my parents raised me good enough to be polite,
Mm-hmm.
and serving others and doing what I can to uh, be a gentleman.
Mm-hmm.
So, I got attention of a lot of girls, but never in the sense that they were attracted to me.
Right.
Uh, I was kind of chubby growing up, and that kind of has followed me through my years as well. But I think that was probably one of the things that kept me from, being sexually mischievous uh, beyond the experimental stages um, when I was really young.
Yeah. Okay. So some of the. You mean the friend zone kept you?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That can really hang around your neck like a millstone.
Yes.
But pornography so got its hooks in you. You weren't quite getting the attention you maybe were looking for with the girls. So yeah, that really has the potential to sort of perpetuate a habit.
Yeah, it does, and especially when you get that when you can fulfill that feeling without an actual real girl,
Yeah.
you get that false sense of uh, this is kind of this is what normality is. This is normal, and
Yeah. Yeah, I was gonna ask. I'd like to hear a little bit about uh, what effect that may have had on you, and especially growing up in a Christian home and knowing it was wrong, what the sort of ups and downs or the experience of that was like, or how that fit into your, whatever type of character you were taught to sort of cultivate, or, I mean, was there a
Mhm.
lot of shame associated with that?
Yeah, that's kind of a side effect of pornography, especially in a Christian home. You hide it very well. You learn how to compartmentalize things.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, very, very good at hiding from my parents what I had possession of. Um, I think my dad may have found a picture or something, but it was more of a yeah, he's a boy kind of thing.
Right, yeah.
At least he's interested in girls or something along that line. Um, so, and again, being the last of six, I don't think he really encountered that with any of the other two brothers.
Yeah.
So he really didn't know how to address it. And now
Yeah.
that I have it, go ahead.
No, no, I was just gonna say, yeah, that could be one of the more high pressure and I guess just awkward things to address, especially, you know, if it's your youngest, and it's so easy to kind of let it slide, you know, if it's a concern, at least, you know, at least he likes girls type of thing.
Yeah, yeah. It was when it was discovered in, where I was careless or whatever, um, it wasn't dealt with. So, I just went on doing what I did.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and the successful hiding of it, um, that also kind of builds its own sort of castle, I think, in our personalities. You mentioned compartmentalization,
mhm.
and that's another habit that's really easy to get into, huh?
Yeah, not only that, but it's another high that you get,
Right.
when you're hiding something and you get away with it. Same reason people steal, I guess, and they get that that rush.
Yeah,
Uh,
kleptomaniacs, you know, you just get the rush or the satisfaction of successfully pulling off the heist.
right, yeah.
Yeah.
So you can get a buildup of, just like you want more pornography or more drugs, you can get that. You want more of that rush as well. So
Yeah.
that definitely came out later in life as well.
Oh, that's very interesting. Well, so why don't we move on to the next stage? How did that continue to develop?
Um, so uh,
Or if there's something before that, go ahead and move into that. I don't want to skip anything.
no, childhood, as far as everything growing up, I would say it was a good experience.
Yeah.
I felt God's love with me wherever I was. He never left me. Um, I knew who God was. I accepted. I was baptized early on, and so that part of me was always there. It was just that other part that I just went through life, and um, I medicated it and just never addressed it.
Right.
So getting through high school, not really having, I was dysfunctional in high school when I did get a girlfriend, because I didn't know how to properly treat, those sexual situations.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
Uh,
Tell me about that.
so, coming through grade school and not really being that awkward child that didn't have any girlfriends or, wanting girlfriends. Later on, probably junior year is finally where I got my first girlfriend. And, um, there's just a lot of, looking back, there's a lot of regret. And, how I either pressured or talked to, I was still a gentleman and I still did things that on the surface looked good, but, I was secretly, trying to push towards this desire of that I was getting fulfilled in pornography.
Yeah, and you
Um,
had at least, well, I guess a half a decade of training of
yeah,
unreal expectations being sort
yes,
of instilled in you.
yeah. That's the bummer part, is that I didn't realize it was dysfunctional.
Yeah.
I was going on. And all my friends, they looked at pornography, and so what, not a big deal. But I don't know where they're at currently. I just know that in my particular circumstance and the way I dealt with it through high school and through relationships, it was unhealthy,
Yeah.
and that actually bled into my marriage as well. After leaving high school and doing the occasional, doing the party, doing the racing, doing the whatever, beating the mailboxes, or getting in trouble. It's usually, so a good time in high school was go around to the bonfire and throw bullets in the bonfire until they go off.
Oh my
Just
gosh.
stupid stuff like that.
Yeah. Wow. Really rolling the dice.
Right. So that's just a snapshot of my high school years, and too much drinking and getting away with it, sneaking in at night. And uh, my dad is just before we leave high school here. So he's still alive. My mom has passed, but my dad is, I would call him a workaholic. Growing up, we didn't go on vacations. We did yard work or worked on our property, clearing brush. That's what we did for fun.
Mm-hmm.
So that I forgot where I was going with that. So anyways, I guess just to say that my dad put a really good work ethic in me, and that carried on into employment when I was in high school. And so I kept busy. In other words, I found ways to keep my time accounted for where it really didn't affect me too much except my downtime at home.
Yeah.
You know, when I was alone or whatever. So
now, I want to give the opportunity if there's if you mentioned your mother passing. What age were you when she passed?
Just recently. It was November last year.
Oh, okay. I thought you were referencing sometime when you were a teen.
No.
Okay.
No,
well, we can talk about that later then if you want.
Sure. Yeah. It's my mom actually, we can talk about it whenever. She was a great mother. She prayed with me regularly and we read the Bible together, and she actually became an ordained minister when I graduated high school.
Ooh.
So yeah, she actually had an opportunity to officiate, weddings and whatnot. And
okay, so you're a fairly sort of modern group of Christians then.
Yeah. So, as far as family life growing up, I would say it was a 10.
Yeah, got lucky. That's good. Good for you, man.
Yeah, very fortunate, and avoided the drugs that was all around me, and only through mom's prayers.
Yeah. So you mentioned your dad may have found something and kind of did the dad thing. That seems like a pretty classic dad response to finding pornography in their son's room or something. Did your mom ever become aware of it? Was there ever a confrontation there?
There was never a confrontation.
Stressing me out just thinking about it.
Yeah, she, I think she was willfully oblivious.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, and I think it was, she said her prayers for me. We talked about salvation and doing the right thing, what the Bible says, but that portion of it never circled back around to my mom.
Well, that could be a relief in some ways.
Yeah, I did have the opportunity to speak to her later in life about kind of what I was going through, and she didn't act like she had known any of it. So
interesting.
I think she was just busy.
Yeah, sure.
6 kids is kind of a handful.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I can totally understand that. Now, you mentioned meeting your wife. When did that happen?
So I moved to the big city.
What age?
Moved to get just out of high school. I was ready to leave the little town of
ready for
Central
the big
Oregon.
World.
Yeah, so I was packed and ready to go the day after I graduated, and moved in with my sister in a little town called Gresham, Oregon. And I went to school at Mount Hood Community College to get an education in automotive. So I wanted to be a mechanic. And I did that, and life was good. That's where I started to experiment with marijuana. But it was pretty much just recreational. It wasn't anything I was going out and buying. It
wasn't a habit per se.
Kind
of social.
Yeah. So the kid from Alaska would say, "Come on over to my house. I got a bag of marijuana," and it was an actual garbage bag.
Oh my gosh. The 70s, man. I hear stories like that all the time from the 70s, that marijuana was regularly sort of measured out in pounds.
Yeah, it was like the 55-gallon bag.
Oh my gosh.
It was crazy. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah,
So
no
anyway,
wonder he was inviting as many people over as he could.
that's my one and only fun drug story I got. So
Well, I'm sure there's some pot smokers and former pot smokers who are uh, elated about that story.
so as far as my life through college, and everything just continued the normal. I was addicted to pornography.
Hmm.
I was doing whatever I could to get that next high. I was going to the Portland. I don't know if you've ever been through there, but there's tons of opportunity for just satisfying the flesh.
Yeah,
If you know what I
famously
mean.
a lot of strip clubs in Portland.
Strip clubs, yeah. So the bookstores, especially, and I would frequent these bookstores, and whenever, because I was working now and I had money, and that's what I'd spend my money on, and this was before I got married. So basically the habit just progressed and got worse, and
Yeah.
um,
Well, and that's a special kind of pornography habit too when you have to go to a bookstore because you're overcoming. I mean, that's kind of out in the open. Kids today
yeah,
will never know the fear of having to go to a public bookstore to buy pornography and to build a collection that you physically have to store somewhere.
yeah, back in my day, I had to go to the bookstore.
In that one sense, it's bookstores are a little bit more innocent nowadays, I think.
Well, yeah, now you just go to the library and get on a computer. Uh,
Oh my god. There's always that guy.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Uh, I wasn't that guy, just saying.
Okay.
Um,
Well, I'm happy to hear that.
so, anyways, as as I progressed through college and found my wife, and fell in love with this girl that I worked with, and thought she was absolutely just gorgeous, and had to meet her. And I just was sure that, just like every other girl I knew, was probably just not going to be interested. And but she was. So we started dating, and she said yes. And it was several years later. We lived together for a little bit, and I think she had a sense of my unhealthiness, in that fact that I was still hiding pornography. I wasn't revealing to her, but she could tell that I was, something wasn't. I had an unusual appetite for just the strange and the things that most people, I don't think she encountered that with any other
Yeah.
previous relationships.
Well, that's very interesting. First of all, living with somebody and like a girlfriend, it's different with parents, but living with someone like a girlfriend and hiding pornography seems like a next level challenge. Um, and also, yeah, so by this time, I mean, you might be talking 10 years after your first experience, and with that sort of developing appetite for the new and the novel. I mean, it sounds like, and you can confirm or deny or neither. It sounds like that it had, yeah, kind of drifted into some unconventional uh, proclivities,
Yeah, yeah,
at
you could
least
say
by
that.
a normal standard, by a typical standard, I'd say.
Yeah, and nothing's new under the sun, and I'm not the only one who has struggled with this. So I'm not saying it's abnormal
Yeah,
that people struggle with this. Yeah, almost all guys struggle with this at some point in their lives, maybe at different levels.
yeah,
But you gotta, Jesus said that if you look at a woman in lust, you've committed adultery with her in your
boy,
heart. And
yeah.
and it's about that this time in my life that I started to realize that this is wrong what I'm doing, but I couldn't stop. You
Mm,
know, and it was I at before this I had always thought, well, I can stop whenever I want, because I was single and did whatever I want. But when I found my wife, I wanted to stop and I couldn't. Um, so uh, about this time is when the internet became available. And so you learn how to use the internet to get material rather than having to go to a bookstore.
Yeah.
And it's even easier nowadays to categorize or, put up those blockades and let parts of your life be seen and that part nobody sees. It's really easy to hide those things. It wasn't as easy back when the internet first started, the old AOL, the making those
The
sounds.
dial up.
Right, yeah. So you dial in and you pull up pornography or, some kind of thing that would be, oh, what's this? And then next thing you know, you've wasted an hour on there and pretty soon your wife walks in and says, what are you looking at?
Oh, yeah. Wow.
It's like, oh, So it took a couple times of getting caught with that before she's like, you got to get help.
Yeah.
There's something wrong. And
What
she goes,
was...
I can't.
Sorry, continue.
She said, I can't fix you. You're going to have to fix you.
Yeah, totally. Now, what was that like getting caught? I mean, what were the feelings associated with that?
Well, you kind of have those. The first is you feel that rush from you're getting away with it, kind of like just like earlier, but it was with the magazines. And so you feel like you're getting away with something, but then you get caught and then you feel guilt, that guilt comes in. And I think that's kind of what the devil's plan, at least for most people with pornography. It isn't leading them into something greater, that they're going to fulfill something. It's trapping them into a spot where they feel so guilty that they have no way out of it, and trying to either break up marriages or destroy families or, just things that the devil goes around to do, that he comes to kill, steal, and destroy. And unfortunately, that's the tool that he uses. And we fall right into it when we are addicted to it, unfortunately. So you got to take that physical step and holding that responsibility up and saying, today I'm gonna do this. It's a physical thing you have to do. It's not just something you put your mind to and say, okay, I'm going to try to do this. You got to physically do it. And unfortunately, I haven't figured out. I don't think there's a formula. There's no formula. It's just daily taking that cross and carrying that burden, that knowing that if I let my mind go this way, that it won't be long before, you're down that path again.
Yeah, totally. Now, how many times would you say your wife caught you before she drew the line in the sand there?
She's going to listen to this, so I don't know how many times. It was multiple, I'm sure, probably a dozen or more. I don't know.
Wow, a dozen. And I mean, I'm sure that there were talks every single time. I mean, it had to have been heartbreaking on some level for her.
Oh man, yeah, because just when I finally did go in and get figured out an organization that I can go see and show my wife that I'm making a physical attempt to stop this. There's a group out here called For Men Only, and done by Pure Life Alliance, and we had weekly meetings, kind of like AA meetings.
Yeah. And
it was with a group of guys that we'd all, and our goal was to come to, I don't know if it was more of a, this is what I did this week. And that's kind of what it turned into. So I don't want to bash that particular program, but it definitely was helpful for me at the time. And it got me through a rough spot. And it's important that you recognize that you have to take those measures, those steps, and they will help you with those steps. But that constant feel of guilt, I looked at a woman lustfully this week.
Yeah.
And it was you sit down and you rack your brain of how many times you looked at something that you weren't supposed to, or you lusted after something. And it's like, this isn't making me stop. This is just making me feel the guilt.
Yeah, I was going to say, because there is certainly a level of taking responsibility for, you know, actions.
Mhm.
Um, and it kind of sounds like it was mostly sort of an accountability type program. The thing with accountability, is that when something is regular enough, it doesn't. Um, there's only so many times you can fess up to something and it still hold some sort of power, I think.
Right. Yeah. So then, after you've been there for a while, you start extrapolating and, or not telling the truth. And it's like, man, I don't want to tell these guys I messed up again. It's like every week I got to, and this Bob over here in the corner, he's perfect. He hasn't messed up in weeks. And so, you feel like this measuring line is being held up against you. I think it was there that the Lord finally showed me that, it's a heart problem.
Yeah.
Until you fix your heart, it's not going to go away.
Yeah, totally. Now, what kind of effect did it have that I'm sure it helped sort of learning that it was more of a common problem, that it wasn't just you?
Yeah, that was actually, I would say, one of the more encouraging things from going to that group is seeing that not just in that group, which is just a sampling from the city that I live in. It's a broader thing that it affects men all across the country. And there's no wonder because pornography is a billion-dollar business.
Yeah, right.
So,
So,
it
yeah.
sells.
Yeah, certainly. And so, yeah, I mean, that is one thing with any sort of problem, whether it's drugs or alcohol or pornography or whatever the problem may be. I mean, breaking down that isolation that you were talking about, the compartmentalization where it can be just your secret little zone that nobody else gets let into and nobody else knows about. But really having your eyes open that, your secret little zone is the same little zone that a lot of, if not hyperbolically, everybody has. And opening up that zone, and at least recognizing it, and once other people start knowing about it, it certainly is one of the first steps towards, decompartmentalizing.
Yeah, it really is. I think you've unpacked that well. Getting that knowledge is the first step. That knowledge is knowing that, okay, so this isn't something that just I'm struggling with, and this is what people have done to successfully break free from it. And all the programs in the world and counseling is those are things that I think help people individually in where they're at. And my next step was to try to help other men get out from underneath that, and that's really where my breakthrough came from, is actually counseling men from my church, making myself available to talk to guys who are usually, they're at their wits' end of, my wife caught me with pornography and now she wants a divorce. And, this is where I usually get to talk to guys nowadays.
The rock bottom
The rock
situation.
bottom. Yeah. They don't want to bring it out in the open. They know it's wrong and they feel the guilt. They know it's hurting their wife, when they got caught last time, but they're so deep into it that they don't want to bring it out in the open because then they're just exposing that wound. That they're doing it voluntarily rather than being caught with it. And like I said, it's a hard issue, and unless you're convicted from the heart and you want to change from the heart, you're not going to change. It's gonna be something that you constantly are coming back to, like a dog to its vomit.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. So you said that you kind of had to move on from that group. Was there another group, or what was the next step in that?
The next step was actually counseling or just helping other guys,
Yeah.
making myself available to men in my church, and letting people know that my story, that's where the devil has a lot of that power, is when it's hidden.
Yeah.
So, just getting my story out there and telling people like, hey, this is where I come from and I'm here to help you. Let's talk about it. Getting it out in the open is part of that healing. It's like getting air to a wound. You got to sometimes let that get that pain hit before it actually starts getting better.
Yeah. Now, again, through this process, how long would you say that process was just to get to that point?
That was at least probably 2 or 3 years after I got done. When I finished with the Pure Life Alliance, and I felt the Holy Spirit leading me away from that. This isn't doing me any good anymore.
Yeah.
And I told the guy who headed it up, this is why I'm leaving. I feel like there's something more for me, and so it's been a process of when I talk to people, it's probably the first couple guys I talked to didn't go over the best. I'm kind of a learning curve of being a self-taught. I wouldn't call myself a counselor. I'm just somebody who has experienced life in that way. So now I'm out there putting myself available to help where I can.
Well, that's awesome. Good for you, man. That sounds like a real rewarding journey, and I'm sure your wife is happy about it too.
Oh yeah. Yeah, she absolutely is. And, I don't think she really likes to hear my past or the stories of, what made me this way. But she'll listen to this and I think she'll get it a little bit more. So it's good for everybody.
Well, good. Hi, wife. So, I mean, if there's anything else to add to that, I'd love to make the time for it. But I do know that you had, you mentioned in your email that in 2003 you had a very interesting experience.
Yeah. Yeah. So I never had chicken pox when I was a kid growing up. All my siblings had it, and my mom just assumed I got it at some point, and I never did.
She just assumed. I mean, with 6 of you guys, I could see how you could lose track.
Right. So I was never immunized for it, and unfortunately, in 2003, my son was just born. He was a couple months old, on my second kid at this point, and I got chicken pox. What's it called? Varicella zoster virus.
Sure. You could have said anything and I'll agree with you.
Yeah. In adults, at least at the time when I got it, back in 2003, it was, they said it was 80% fatal for adults.
Oh my gosh.
And matter of fact, when I went to the hospital finally, the doctor there told my parents that we just had 2 other people die from this just recently. So odds aren't good that, anyways, they weren't very encouraging. I went in several times before it was finally correctly diagnosed. They just kept saying, you got the flu, you got the flu. They give me IVs of fluid because I was dehydrated. And finally I collapsed on the kitchen floor at my house, and my wife's like, okay. I woke up, I was good. The next morning we went in, and the doctor's like, you got chicken pox.
Wow.
So I didn't know what that meant.
So as an adult, does it not sort of manifest with the red dots or something? It seems like that. I'm no doctor, but that seems like a giveaway to me.
Yeah. After about 2 weeks of misdiagnosis of this, that next day when I collapsed on the bed, on the kitchen floor, went to the doctor, they could actually finally start to see the dots.
Oh, interesting.
So they said it was inside my body. It was, what do they call it? Basically, it was
metastasized.
That's the word.
Yeah. I don't know what it means, but I've watched House.
You nailed it. So it was inside my body, and it wasn't being externally displayed. So they kept sending me back home. So long story short is I went in, they gave me a shot for the pain because I told them my pain level was, right up there by a 10. And that's the last thing I remember for about a month, at least in the real world. I was in a drug-induced coma for at least 3 weeks.
Wow. That's pretty serious.
Yeah, it
I mean, I
was.
knew that chickenpox was more serious for adults, but 80% fatality and medically induced coma for 3 weeks is, I mean,
Yeah,
that's about as serious of a move you could make.
yeah, it was interesting. My poor wife, who had just had our son,
Oh, wow.
basically was told that uh, your husband isn't going to make it. You know, he's if he gets any
Wow.
sicker, if he gets any sicker tonight, he's not going to make it through the night. And you know, that was kind of the ongoing prognosis. There's nothing more we can do.
Oh, my gosh.
I got a blood infection while I was in there. My organs were shutting down, and you know they were constantly fighting this. Um, I started having seizures when I was in my drug-induced coma, which made things even more complicated. So yeah, and then in my brain, so I'm in this drug-induced coma. In my brain, I'm in a far out world that basically is my daily life of just like me and you talking right now was this world in my head, basically. And I was battling demons and talking to God. God would talk to me with words in the sky.
What? So you were living like a whole dream life during these
Yeah,
3 weeks.
right. Yeah, it was intense.
Whoa.
And there was things that I went through that when I got out, you know, I'm looking back, I'm like, that was prophetic. God was showing me things that was going on and not just real time when I was in the coma, but in the future, things that are yet to happen.
That's
Just
crazy.
personal things.
I
Yeah, it
mean,
was.
did you tell your doctors this afterwards? That seems
No,
scientifically relevant.
no, I did not.
Wow.
I woke up one time when I was at the tail end of it and I was still kind of coming in and out of the drug induced coma. And I told my dad that the guy next to me had died. I saw him get taken off, and um, he's like, "Yeah, he did die."
Wow.
So I could actually see, and this is I don't know what this means, Basil. I don't know if this is something that is. I won't know till eternity. Honestly, it could have just been the drugs. So I could actually see people's sins above their head, and I would float down the hallway of this hospital, and I could see people walking around, and I could see above their head all the different sins that they were committing, that currently in process of committing, or that they were involved with. It was weird. It was like
That's
words above
crazy.
their head.
Now, was this like a dream where you didn't really have control, or were you sort of autonomous at this time? Like, could you choose to float down the hallway, or were you kind of experiencing it as it happened to you?
It was autonomous. I couldn't control. It was like just me going places. Um,
Wow.
and just as quick as I was doing that, I would be in some other situation, battling a demon, doing something. I was uh, either fighting demons for my lungs, which was a whole weird story. Uh, Basically, they killed me, and I had to get my lungs back, and it was a fight. And they
I,
took my skin at one point. In my
oh.
This is all in my head, of course. Just weird stuff like
Was
that.
now when you say fighting them, are you like have a sword, or are you wrestling? Like, whoa. I'm
Like
just so curious. This is so fascinating. I smell a business opportunity, Mark. I think if we can get the licensing, we can sell 3 week long spiritual journeys.
Oh man, I actually when I got home, I there was so much in my head. I asked the Lord. I said, Lord, whatever is not important, just take it away. And if it is important, you can leave it there or bring it back to me when it becomes important or relevant. I was messed up in my head. They were doing this show here in Portland. It was the body visual, I think it was called. It was basically
Yeah,
it was real life animals and humans that had no skin.
yeah.
You could see
Is the exhibit that's made the
exhibit.
rounds the past 10
Hmm.
years or so, where they've sort of plasticized or solidified different body systems, like the nerve system or the blood vessel system, stuff like that. and
exactly.
put them
Yeah,
on
that was
display?
it. They were advertising those on commercials on TV, and I couldn't even watch the commercials. I was so disturbed by it. Um,
Wow.
my wife ended up going to that because she was going through medical school, and she was interested in that. So she went to that, and I'm like, I want nothing to do with it. It's like, and later on, it's like I think I was actually dealing with a mild form of PTSD.
Mm.
Just the symptoms that I was dealing with, and just what I had to avoid, and would just mess me up for days. I couldn't function properly. Um, but
I do have
that's gone.
I do have one question. I want to talk about the PTSD, but I have one other question. When you were in the coma for 3 weeks and you were flying around fighting demons and
Hmm.
seeing through spiritual eyes, did it feel like 3 weeks, or did it feel shorter, or did it feel longer? What to your sort of consciousness? How long were you living in that state?
When I finally came out of the coma, where I was conscious, I had thought it was 2 days max, maybe three.
Oh, so not that long.
No.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And my wife's like, no, you've been out for 3 weeks.
Wow.
I'm
That's
like,
very
oh yeah.
interesting. It's interesting how in those types of states, I mean, time in general can uh, s- not track as well as in the sort of physical space. But yeah, I've heard stories of people being in comas and them like living entire lives during that time. Like I just spent 50 years as a Native American and now I'm back. That's crazy. But 2 days, that's like a nice little spiritual vacation.
Yeah, yeah, probably.
To
It's a
put
good way
it
to look
in the
at it.
most ridiculous and lightest sense, your horrific experience, to put it in the lightest and ridiculous sense possible.
Yeah, by the mercy of God, it was only 3 days in my mind.
Wow. Well, that's very interesting. So this PTSD, you kind of had trouble with what? Just stuff pertaining to what? Medical stuff,
Well,
or just the human body, or?
like spiritual things, demonic things,
Interesting.
and I don't want to. I don't want to make it sound like I real people go through PTSD, that are in battle zones and stuff. I don't want to make what they went through any less.
Yeah.
What I went through, I would say it was just a mild form of PTSD from
Yeah.
it. I just know it affected me, and through the grace of God, through time, it went away.
Wow. Well, good. Amen. I'm happy to hear that. How else did that? I mean, did that cause any bigger problems in your life, or was it just you just had to
Well,
get over some stuff?
it's funny you ask. So when I came out of the coma, and it was a miracle.
Uh-huh.
When I came out, it was, everyone, even the doctors are like, we don't know what happened. He just got better. And um, I have my
You said,
brothers.
"Yeah, I did get better because I fought my lungs and skin back from the demon hordes." You're welcome, doctors.
So I had just to kind of give you an idea of the miracle side of it and coming out of the coma. Um, my brother's wife is Native American,
Mm-hmm.
and her dad, who has a really interesting story of his own, is a Christian now, and he's actually a pastor for Indian nations. He goes around and he tours and does pastoral stuff for Indians,
Uh-huh.
Native Americans. So, anyways, he came in my room. My brother invited him along, and the family was in there, and I was hooked up to all the machines, swelled up like a grape. Um, and Sam said, we go in there, Jack, don't say anything. Just nod your head if it's a spiritual battle, if you sense, because that's kind of what his special gift is in the spiritual realm. That's what he deals with all the time, and he could tell you lots of stories. But so when he walked in the room, he looked at Sam and just his head. My brother said his head went up and down. I was like, yes, definitely a spiritual battle. So, and everyone had been praying for me up to that point, like get better and God help him, God heal him, all this stuff. But as soon as Jack prayed for me, that's when everything started to turn around. It's like from then on, it was a progressive getting better rather than getting worse.
Wow.
So there was definitely something spiritual there that broke free, that opened up, and from there I was released from that. And I'm almost certain that in my own mind dreams that I was dealing with, that they actually changed as well. I don't know when that point was when I was in my dream, but I just know that I got relief from the torment that I was going through, the demonic torment and the battles that I was fighting. It changed from that to pleasant things. So there was definitely something, there was an oppression there, maybe from the pornography that I was dealing with, but, a rebellion. I don't know what it was, but
wow, that's amazing.
There was a definite release of power there that freed me from that. And then physically I got better too.
Wow, that's great. Wow, what an awesome point in that whole adventure you were having.
Right. So that was 2003, and the doctors were pretty sure that I had damage in my body from that, and they could say I was taking anti-seizure medication, and they basically wanted me to stay on this medication for, they didn't say how long, but they had no stopping of, you got to stay on this medication or you could have a seizure. And it messed me up. That medication itself messed me up. It gave me, the side effects were suicide.
Oh.
Labeled on the label, one of the side effects is you may have thoughts of suicide.
Yeah.
It messed me up. So they switched it to another one. And this one was, you may have some weight gain. And then I did. I was already chubby, but I got really chubby. So I'm like, this has got to stop. So I quit it altogether. I know the doctors didn't, they could say, if you quit this, you gotta get yourself off it gradually. And, but I didn't, I'd stopped taking it. I know that's not good advice for anybody, but that's what I did. It was messing me up and I just quit and never had a seizure. I've never had one since then. And,
that's amazing. That's its own sort of miracle in a way.
Yeah, completely. I had to learn how to walk again after you're in a hospital bed for, multiple weeks like that. You lose all your muscle mass and had to go through, the physical therapy to lift your legs up. And
what an intense life event. That is not something everybody goes through.
Yeah, it was intense. And I'm happy to say that it turned out good and no side effects from that. Matter of fact, no side effects to the point that in 2008, I had the opportunity to donate my kidney to a friend of mine at church. So, and my wife was pretty sure that I wasn't going to be able to do it because of the damage that was done from me being in the hospital. And everything checked out fine. I went through multiple battery of tests, and I gave my kidney to him, and he's living happily ever after now with my kidney in him.
Wow, that's awesome. Wow. Again, that's another thing that not a lot of people get to experience. Who was this guy? Was it your good buddy?
Well, it's a funny story. He was a new guy at church. The church I was going to was a fairly small church, but I was involved with the men's group there, and he started coming to men's group and learned that he had kidney failure, is going through dialysis. And through that process, I learned that he was waiting for a kidney donor. I didn't even know what a living kidney donor was. I didn't know it was possible. I thought, he's waiting for someone to die so he could get a kidney. He's like, no, anybody can give a kidney as long as you're a match. Most people have two. Majority of people have two, so you can actually give one of your kidneys away. I'm like, really? Oh, that's interesting. So went through the process of getting that verified through the local hospitals here. Contacted his donor team, and without his knowledge, he didn't know I was doing it. and got all the tests done, and was able to announce to him that I was going to give him my kidney. And he had tried, there was a couple other people before that had tried and didn't make it through the screening process for one reason or another. So he was pretty stoked to find out that I was already authorized and was a match for him. And we had basically set up a time to do it. And it went without a hitch. Matter of fact, my kidney, once the one I have in me currently, when they take one out, it actually grows a little bit to compensate for the missing kidney.
Whoa.
So you don't lose half of your kidney function. You lose only like a quarter of it or a third of it.
Wow. The human body is amazing. I did not know that. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Well, it's good to know that our body's good at compensating for our generosity.
Yeah. And that, honestly, Basil, that story of the kidney donation is another miracle in my life that only happened because of the grace of God and me growing in my faith enough to let go and let God show me where he wanted me and what he wanted to do with me. So it's those small steps like that God has just blessed me.
Small steps like donating a kidney. I mean, what is I find that very interesting. And again, I've said this a couple times. This is a pretty unusual life experience. What was the sort of emotional or spiritual journey towards making that decision? I mean, if everybody knows a guy needs a kidney, there's, potentially hundreds or thousands of people who know this, and yet you were the guy who did it. What's the difference between you and the rest of us?
Nothing. Just take that next step. That was the only thing that got me through it, was just trusting that next step was God was opening the doors, and that if he didn't want me walking through that door, that he was going to stop it somehow. Wow. And just trusting in that next step. It wasn't a large thing. It was just, the kidney donation was a big thing for him, but the steps that brought me to that were one step at a time. Take a step forward and trust, take a step forward and trust. It wasn't you didn't have to take this large step into it. It was, Lord, if this is what you want of me, then I'm going to take this step. And if it's not where you want me, or, you're going to stop it. There's actually an interesting story, a writing, an article that was written about it. One of the local writers here in Portland wrote it, and he wrote it for a magazine. I think I told you this. I actually shared the article on the Canary Cry Facebook page in the Bible topics.
Oh,
so
cool.
Back in February, I shared it. I just felt compelled to share it with anybody who might be wanting some encouragement in that matter. So I don't share it to boost me up. It was just all, this is a miracle, and I wanted to get it out there. So it is an interesting read. If people want to go in and click on that, they should see it in there and be able to read it. It's about probably a 10-page document. So it is a kind of a long story.
Whoa. That's incredible. Though it's like a full spread they gave you on that.
Yeah, it was fun. They came out and did the photo shoot with us, and just trying to celebrate what happened.
Yeah, okay. So I'm not the only one who's very impressed by this.
Apparently not. I don't know.
You're very modest. That's very good.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was a good thing. It was a very good thing.
Well, that's incredible, man. You really have, I'm always surprised, and I think you kind of had a little tinge of this too when contacting me. Pretty much every single person who contacts me, either they're like, oh, I got this great story for you, I want to tell you. And I'm like, okay, great, let's get into it. Or they're like, I don't really know if I have anything to add or anything that'll help anybody, or, I don't know if I really have an important story to tell, but I'd just love to chat with you. And those people always have incredible stuff to tell and are some of the episodes that people, send me emails and get the most out of. So I think that this is one of those ones. You sent me a very humble email, but I'm glad we made it happen. We obviously, as is not uncommon with this show, take a couple tries to get the scheduling right. But I'm so glad that we did. Now, and maybe we'll repost that. Maybe we'll post it on that's what we'll do. We'll put a link to the article in the show notes, and also we'll post it on the TJT page. So if you're out there, make sure to like the TJT page or join the Canary Cry community or wherever that is. We'll get it out there. People need to read that story. And that's incredible. I bet you got some points with the wife there too, giving away kidney. You generous man, you.
Well, you can read it in the story, but she actually was apprehensive because
I was gonna say, actually, she sounds like you kind of want your husband to have all his body parts.
Right. Yeah. So she finally agreed to do it because if she wasn't okay with it, I wasn't okay with it.
Sure. Yeah. Totally.
Just God really opened her heart to trust in Him as well through this whole story. It wasn't just me trusting in God, because when you got a young family and you got a mortgage and there's a lot of weight there of potential. What if something goes wrong? And they tell you right up front that it's a surgery and there could be complications, and you're basically sign and waiver that we're not responsible for any of this if something happens.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, anytime you go under the knife is not a guaranteed situation.
Yeah. Especially when you're healthy. I was feeling healthy at the time, and there's no problems with me. I just wanted to help someone else and felt the Holy Spirit leading me to do that. And, she's like, wait a minute, what's going on here?
What are you talking about?
Yeah. At first it was, well, honey, there's a lot of tests I got to do. There's things that I got to pass before I'm even an eligible candidate for it.
Right.
So she was like,
let's not get too worked up.
Yeah. She was like, well, he was so sick just, a couple years ago. There's no way the doctors are going to clear him for this. And
yeah, she's like, yeah, sure. I'll let you entertain this idea.
Right.
But I don't have to tell you not to do it, because the doctors definitely won't let you.
Yep.
Oh my gosh. That is so funny. Well, okay. Man, that is awesome. Now, I do need to know, though, among all of these life experiences, where in the world did you get the time or the energy to discover the work that I do along with Gons?
I was actually, when I was driving to work the other day, I thought, there was somebody I listened to on YouTube back in 2014, and they said specifically, you got to listen to this podcast, Canary Cry Radio. They touched on one of your subjects and said, oh, these guys were talking about it and this is awesome. And I could not remember for the life of me where I heard that. Well, at the time I was working at an industrial park where I did a lot of the maintenance, exterior yard maintenance and whatnot. Mm-hmm. So I was downloading on my iTunes just podcasts to listen to. A lot of preaching and just good biblical teaching, Ravi Zacharias, whatever.
Yeah, of course.
And it was in my life where I was getting interested in kind of the fringe topics on YouTube. Mm-hmm. And I didn't come across anything with you guys yet, but this one guy said I need to listen to it, and I wish I knew who it was. So I did. I listened to it, one of your episodes, and I immediately downloaded everything on my iTunes so I could listen to it when I'm out working with my earphones on.
Nice one.
And I couldn't wait till the next one came out, and it's like I was addicted. And as far as getting that information, it just wasn't the stuff you guys had. It was a lot of the Derek Gilbert, the Skywatch TV came along later, but Prophecy Watchers and getting really interested in, maybe we are in the end times, and, maybe the Lord is coming back soon. And it's like, I got to get ready. I got to know this stuff. And so things that were interesting me at that time in 2014 was the kind of the fringe topics, and from there just escalated into wow, this all makes sense. It's actually, and that led to me getting the book of Enoch and reading that and learning about the Nephilim, and you go down the whole road.
Totally. Now, when was this on the timeline again? I'm sorry if I missed that.
That was 2014 when I started listening to it.
2014. So you already only had one kidney.
Yeah.
Okay. We met post 2 kidneys. Okay, very good. Well, that's well, I'm glad that the simple answer wasn't Age of Deceit. I'm glad there was more to that.
I did watch Age of Deceit, but I think it was after I had already been listening to the Canary Cry Radio, and I was absorbing a lot of the information from Gons on the Face Like the Sun YouTube channel.
Oh yeah.
So I was watching his stuff, and Vigilant Christian. I was always listening to his stuff every time he came out with something new. The Illuminati and the TV shows and the music videos. And,
sure.
So I'm kind of that's kind of where I'm at now. Is just and there was definitely a coming to moment where it's like, this can't be real. No way.
We've all been there, man.
The thing everyone talks about, like you go through this withdrawal syndrome or this awakening. It's like, this can't be real. It's like everything I've known is, but it makes so much sense. It's like, it's got to be true. And then, you start contemplating things through the Holy Spirit. It's like, Holy Spirit, is this real? Is this where it lead me to more information if this is real? And then the information comes. It's like, well, God is showing me stuff that it's got to be real, because it's, there's other people are seeing it, and it makes so much sense. It connects all the dots, basically.
Yeah, and it's hard to be too critical of some of those theories when you spent 3 weeks battling demons to get your lungs back.
That's right.
Yeah. Wow, that's very interesting. What's maybe your most or the topic that you're most fascinated in? What kind of really holds your attention?
Oh boy, and as far as in the fringe community,
yeah, well, or real life. Let's get to know you.
Okay. So I play guitar as well, so I do spend time with that. I like listening to new music, just experiencing new music and trying to get where people are coming from with what they've created.
Yeah.
A lot of doing the nonverbal art thing, trying to draw and paint and stuff. I do that. But those are kind of side interests. I spend most of my time just being, a family man, working, making money, doing housework. That's kind of where my life is right now.
Just a regular guy who spent 3 weeks soaring through the spirit realm.
Yeah, when I'm listening to my iTunes, which I get a lot of time because I do a lot of driving back and forth, rush hour traffic, I'm probably 3 hours minimum a day just in rush hour traffic.
Oh wow, yeah.
So I spend a lot of time listening to you. Hey. I was a little starstruck when you first got on the phone, because can't believe I'm talking to him.
You made it, man. You're on the line.
Yeah, that's right. So the stuff Josh Peck talks about is very fascinating to me, with the wormholes and multiverse dimensions, stuff like that's very interesting to me. I love Mike Heiser. Listen to what he has to say about the spiritual entities. That stuff, just when it made sense to me, and it's just like the whole thing came alive, and it was like bursting, and it's like, oh, that makes so much sense. The spiritual realm, and how these entities, the little g gods, were controlling the world, and this battle's been going on, and I do like watching movies, the Marvel universe things, and of course, you got to look at that as a Christian. You look at that as entertainment, but you also got to wonder some of that stuff is there someone behind the scenes actually drawing this out? Was this planned out years in advance because of an actual narrative that's in real life, and they're just using the movies as a storyline
Oh, certainly. Yeah.
So, just things like that interest me.
Yeah, well, that's great. I mean, that's where it's at, man. Once you start thinking about things on a deeper level, you start seeing it all around you.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Yeah.
I gotta imagine, and I'm not quite landing the plane, but I gotta ask, as far as your health nowadays, I mean, would you say you're at 100%, or do you feel some repercussions from your ordeals?
As far as for my ordeals, I'm 100%. I did have a cold last week, so when we didn't hook up, it was probably a good thing because I'm just now getting cleared up to the point where I'm not as congested.
Mm-hmm.
So, it was a God thing that we had a little delay getting together.
Okay, yeah, that works.
But as far as health goes for my kidney and all that, I was going in for annual checkups on it, and never a problem. And matter of fact, the doctors told my friend who got my kidney that he's boring basically. He's on the least amount of anti-rejection medication. It was just a perfect match. You couldn't ask for a better match than us two together.
Ah, that's amazing. Are you still buddies with that guy?
Well, kind of like family, I would consider him family now.
Okay, good. I'm glad that's where that went.
Yeah.
And not, he conned me out of all my savings and disappeared to Tahiti. So no, I wouldn't say we're friends.
No, we are friends on Facebook. We kind of have different lifestyles.
Yeah.
So I would, in the sense that he's family, is kind of like family. We get together when we can, and we haven't done that in a really long time. So I probably need to reach out more to him and say hi. But
don't we all really?
Yeah, he lives his life, and I live my life, and we're busy just like everything else.
Yeah, no, that's totally true. I totally get that. But you've got that eternal bond. You're connected.
Yes.
By your empty space in the side of your abdomen, and his thankfully full space in the side of his abdomen.
Yes, absolutely.
Oh,
yeah.
That's awesome.
And I pray for him every day. I know that.
Yeah. Well, that's cool, man. I love that. So you're feeling good. You're doing good.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Love it. All right. Well, I do gotta ask, what's your stance on furry friends?
So we are mainly a dog family.
Okay.
My wife is big into these boxer dogs, which is a medium-sized to large breed, short hair. They got to stay indoors. Here in the Northwest, where it's rainy and cold, they got to be inside. But we've had about last couple ones we had that have had health problems. So we've been through a couple of these dogs. We just put our last one down about 3 weeks ago. So it's been I don't want to say we need to pick a different breed because my wife hates it when I say that. But I think it comes with that breed.
Yeah.
But we do have a cat, and my daughter, who is in college now, doesn't live at home. It's her cat, and the cat's pretty much lost now that she's not here anymore to torment her. So, but she's doing fine, and we enjoy having her.
Good. Well, here, I'll give you an opportunity to get some points. Your wife is obviously one of the most patient women I've ever heard of. And now tell me about your wife, and also is she also into Canary Cry or the fringe topics?
She is not into the fringe topics.
Smart lady.
As far as I'm aware, she is a workaholic, kind of like my dad. She works late at night, and she is a human resource manager. So she just is busy all the time, and she's very a homebody where she doesn't really like to go out and spend a lot of time out frolicking with friends or whatever. She'd rather just curl up with a good book and maybe a glass of wine or a TV show or something. But we are enjoying life as it is.
Well, that's good. Enjoying life is very important.
Yeah.
Well, I love that, man. And as we begin to wrap up here, I do want to give you a chance if you have anything to plug or if you have any last words for everybody. We'd love to hear them.
Well, I knew this question was coming too, and my whole life experiences, what I've been through, and is just, it's reinforced in the Holy Spirit leading you and taking that next step. Trust in that the plan that God has for you is going to make its way out somehow. Even when you think you mess up, you didn't mess up beyond God's ability to put you on the right path or keep you on a path that is where he wants you. And just take that next step and trust that if it's not where you think that God wants you, that that door is going to be closed for you, and the guidance through life is just temporary. It's going to, one way or the other, end up in God's hands. If you are a believer in Jesus Christ, then there's really nothing else you have to worry about. Just trust that the path to the end is in all God's hands.
Amen. And your story is certainly a good example of that. Mark, thank you so much, my man. I'm really glad that we made it happen and we got you on the show. And thank you so much for telling your story.
Yeah, I hope I don't regret any of it. I'll listen to it later.
I think you're safe on this one, buddy.
Right on. That's good.
Well, why don't you say goodbye to all your new adoring fans, and it's just about dinner time, I think.
Yeah, it is past dinner time. Thank you, Basil. I really appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Well, there you have it, folks. Hope you enjoyed that. Man, Mark, thank you so much for coming on the show, dude. And really important discussion to be had. And also, your sort of supernatural experiences, it's still wild. I still think, I'm recording this outro a couple weeks later, and I still think about that coma spiritual vacation. So thank you so much, Mark. I hope you guys enjoyed that, and I know you did. And if you enjoyed it enough, why don't you consider going to patreon.com/thejoyspiracy Get shout outs and bonus episodes and all sorts of stuff there. And most importantly, you can help me buy wet food for the cats. And really, the support of that show is the support of that Patreon page is what keeps this show going. And, just makes me feel all warm and fuzzy inside when people, really just take the time to sign up and do it. Because I understand that's kind of like the least attractive part of the whole thing. But if you want to support the show financially for a cup of coffee a day, you can buy some cats some wet food. Head over to patreon.com/thejoyspiracy and show your support there. Also, if supporting the show financially is not in the cards for you, make sure to leave a rating and a review on iTunes or whatever podcatcher you're listening on, baby. It means the world. The robots run the world, and the robots take hints from ratings and reviews, so it really helps spread the show. And if you don't want to do that, just hit the share button. Send it straight to a friend. Text message, say you're going to love this. Or post it on Facebook and tag me. Thumbs up, dude. Okay, there we go. Also, if you head to thejoyspiracytheory.com, there's a little tab on the right-hand side. You can leave me a voicemail message. I love those. Do it. Do it now. Go to thejoyspiracytheory.com, right-hand side, voice message tab. Go!